Hi there, welcome to this presentation. Over the next 10 or 15 minutes, I'm going to share with you something that I've come up with, which I call the social flow method. So this is a system that I've created, that I use myself and that I set up for my clients to allow you to connect with your audience consistently and authentically. The problem with social media that comes up for a lot of small businesses and entrepreneurs is that it can be extremely overwhelming. There are multiple platforms. What sort of content should you create? How often should you be sharing it? And then how do you stay on top of managing all those different aspects? And in my experience, anyway, these are the wrong sorts of questions to be asking anyway. So what I'm going to be doing here is taking things back to basics, to the fundamentals, because working out which platform, what content, how often, will all come back to understanding core fundamentals about your audience and about how you can communicate with them. So when I talk about connecting with your audience, what I am referring to is taking the time to really understand them and their points of view. I'll tell you a bit more about myself in a moment, but basically what you need to know is that I'm a copywriter, and understanding what the audience of my clients is thinking, feeling, where they're struggling, and what solution they're looking for. These are all the fundamentals that I spend most of my time doing before I write a single word of copy. And this same principle applies when you're writing social media posts for your audience. And this applies whether you're writing them, whether you're doing videos or using some other format. You need to be able to connect with your audience. And I'm going to go through a few ways that you can do this based on what I've learned through my training as a copywriter. So hopefully it will be coming at it from a different angle than maybe you've heard before. Authenticity is a big word that gets bandied around a lot. And there's good reason for this, because being authentic in the online space particularly can really make the difference between your business soaring or failing. Now, because authenticity is so important, it's also important to really ground it in your customer's experience. And you can do this by making sure that your messaging really matches what your audience and what your ideal clients need to hear from you. And so I'll be going through this in a bit more detail with some ways that you can find out what your audience really wants and needs to hear from you so that you can meet them where they're at. And then consistency. Consistency is really, really important. If you're serious about using social media to expand your reach and grow your business, then staying consistent needs to be one of the top priorities. And this is because social media in a lot of ways is a conversation. It's about building relationships. And so if you or your brand are only appearing on social media sporadically every now and then your audience doesn't get a chance to get to know you. And also by showing up consistently, your audience can trust that you will do what you say you're going to do. If you're always there sharing your message, letting them see what you're about, and allowing yourself to be visible consistently, then you build up this brand aura. It's an expression I like to use. And this social flow method that I'm sharing, the idea behind it is that because you're connecting with your audience where they're at consistently, and you're doing it authentically, and I'm going to show you ways to make sure that you're also keeping your messaging on point, so you're meeting them where they're at, so that you're writing or creating videos or just creating content that is actually speaking to what it is that they need to hear to be able to make that informed decision about to choose to work with you. And so if you start thinking about social media in those terms of creating a brand aura, of this feeling that your audience gets about you, that you're building up, this picture that you're creating of yourself or of your business, then it becomes less of a chore and about just ticking boxes, and it becomes more about authentic conversations and building the relationships. Okay, so let's start with connecting with your audience. Now, I know that there are lots of schools of thought about this, about getting really clear on who your audience is or who your ideal client is. There's brainstorming exercises. There's lots of different ways to approach it, and these all have their place, absolutely. But as a copywriter and from a copywriter's perspective, the best way that we can understand what our audience is feeling and thinking is to ask them, to then listen to what they say, transcribe it all, and then you start collecting their language. By doing it this way, you don't have to spend lots of time trying to come up with ideas or trying to invent creative ways of putting yourself in their shoes. Instead, you spend your time and energy going out, making connections, asking people to have conversations with you, and then all you're doing is listening, getting it transcribed, and then reflecting that language back to them. So ways you can do this are, for example, market research calls. This is particularly useful if you're pivoting, if you're thinking about selling a new product or service, or if you've got something that you're selling at the moment, but you feel like it's not quite hitting the mark. You can reach out to people who fit into the target market that you're aiming for and ask them to get on market research calls. 30 minutes of their time, potentially incentivize them if you feel that's necessary, an Amazon voucher or some sort of free product or service from your own business. But if you can do 3 to 5 market research calls, the information you're going to get from that is gold. And it's one of the best ways you could spend your time to really understand what your market's thinking and feeling, as well as getting lots of language that you can use in your social media. Another way of doing this is what's called customer review mining. So this involves things like going onto Amazon, thinking about the types of books that your ideal client might be reading, or books that people have written around your niche, and have a look at what the books say, but more importantly, read what the reviews. So find books with lots of reviews and see what people are saying about the content, the good and the bad. And you will find amazing things that you can use for ideas for post topics, for things like headlines in your, on your website or in your sales copy as well. And similarly, if you look at what your competitors are doing and look at the reviews and testimonials that they're getting, that will also give you an insight into what the people in your market are thinking and feeling. Now, this is particularly useful because there's no filter there. When you get on a market research call, there's going to be a certain level of the person being a bit self-conscious about the fact that they're talking to you directly and maybe editing themselves a bit. But reviews are unfiltered. People are just saying what they think and saying it in the way that makes the most sense to them. And then another great place to do this is offboarding calls. So instead of just asking for a testimonial in a quite generic way, you can ask if could you have a brief call with them, or send them through some specific questions. And again, by being very clear on what it is that you want to hear from them, you can, and by directing the call or by giving them the questions to answer, then you're prompting them to say the things and talk about the things that you need to know so that your marketing can be more effective. Okay, so let's talk a bit about authenticity, about being authentic specifically on social media. Now, in order to be truly authentic, you need to get very clear on what your values are. What's important to you as a founder of the business, what's important to the business, to the brand, if you've got a team, communicating the values to them, because being clear on that will help you to connect authentically with the people that you are serving through your business, through your products and services. So by understanding your own values, then you can match with the values that you need your ideal clients to have, whether it's sharing a particular philosophical or political view, if there's some sort of ethical component to your business that's important to you. Your values will match your ideal client's values. And so by getting these clear, it's going to help you pin down what you need to be saying in your content, and also frees you up to be authentic, because then It's also a way of repelling people who don't match your values. And by planting a flag and saying this is what we stand for, it's going to be polarizing, yes, but that's what you need to be polarizing so that you can attract your audience to you, and people who aren't suitable for what it is that you do will go and find someone who is a better match for them. Now, this still feeds back into doing the market research and getting on calls with people. Now, because what I always recommend you do is anytime you get on a call with, for customer research or with a client, that you ask permission to record that call and then you get that information transcribed. What this allows you to do is to create an archive or a library of words and sentences and phrases that are exactly what your ideal client or your audience use. And this means that anytime you sit down or someone in your team sits down to write content, you're never starting with a blank page. Start with something that's been said, and it allows you to match the language. You're hearing exactly what it is that they've said, exactly what their problem is or what the outcome is that they want, and then you can craft your content around that. And so by doing it this way, you never ever are starting with a blank page, and you're never guessing, and you're never trying to just come up with ideas out of thin air. You know what your audience want because you've asked them, they've told you, and you've got it in their language, and you can use that as a starting point. Now, speaking of language, copy, social media, content on social media is not the same as content that you would write for an academic paper, for a technical report. It's not the language that you were taught in school. It's not about grammar rules or spelling. Content on social media is about having conversations, and your language needs to reflect that. Now, this doesn't mean that you have to, sound funny and witty. There's certainly brands out there who are famous for having a really distinct and quirky brand voice. And trying to achieve something like that can be extremely overwhelming and is taking it to an extreme that you don't need to go to. But what you do need to understand is that when you're writing for your business, particularly online and especially on social media, but this actually also applies to your website, to any sales pages, landing pages, anything that's written online, anything that you would call copy or copywriting, you need to reframe it to yourself as a conversation and have the language reflect that. And the reason being is that it allows you to connect more authentically, but also the connection you're having with your audience this way is an emotional one. It's an empathetic one. You want your audience to be able to read what you've written and digest it really quickly. You don't want to make them think, wrap their heads around a concept, or feel intimidated by jargon or confused by language that they don't understand. So again, going back to the market research or the research-led approach, you've got this language, they've given it to you, you know the words they use, and you can reflect it back to them. And always keep in mind that it's a conversation. You're having a conversation. Try to write how you would talk. You can record yourself talking. It's something I do. It's something I recommend all the time. If you struggle to kind of break that habit of writing really formally, try doing first drafts as an audio voice note to yourself and then getting that transcribed, because you're more likely to talk conversationally, and then you can start tweaking that and turn that into your social media content. One of the cornerstones of making social media work for your business is by being consistent. Now, whether it's that you post 4 times a day, once a day, every second day, find what works for you, but do it consistently. Because then you build up rhythm, you start gaining traction, you refine your messaging. Because remember, this process, you'll constantly be fine-tuning it. So it's an ongoing process. And by writing social media content consistently, it's a really effective part of that process to help you refine your messaging and keep growing and evolving as a business. Now, one of the things that I think is really important in this umbrella of being consistent is to consistently hit certain marketing touch points. So again, from a copywriting point of view, there is a journey that we take our readers on. I'm just going to go through them briefly, and they're probably familiar to you. But again, remember, When we're talking about like this, looking at struggles or their fears and frustrations, quite often these are described as pain points. This isn't about listing a bunch of pain points that you think that your audience has. This is about going out, talking to them and understanding where it is they're at right now. So where they're struggling right now is where you need to meet them with your content for social media. And so you need to consistently show that you understand where they're struggling, what their fears and frustrations are right now, so that they know that you understand their specific scenario. Because if you understand and empathize with it, then you're probably, in their mind, going to be able to help them. And obviously then, I'm sure you've heard of this as well, the benefits or the outcomes or the desires. So this is if your ideal client starts off somewhere with a particular struggle or pain point, when they finish working with you or using your product or whatever it is, going through your program, at the end of it, they want to feel a certain way, or they want a specific outcome. They want something different. And so you need to get really clear on what that is. And quite often when you spend time talking and listening to people, what you thought what they want is not necessarily exactly dialed into what it is that they want. And sometimes, and quite often, and the reason why having these actual conversations with people is so valuable is that quite often they don't know until they start saying it. You know, we can all experience that feeling of hearing yourself say something and go, oh, is that what I thought? The benefit of spending the time having the conversations is that you're allowing people who are in your audience to have the chance to articulate it as well. But again, you want to make sure you're touching on this idea of where they're going to end up after they've bought your product or finished working with you, so that they know that you understand and empathize about what it is that they want to achieve. So handling objections is a really, really important part of one of your marketing touch points. And this is because there's always going to be reasons in the back of the mind, in the back of people's minds about why they shouldn't sign up or buy, invest in your product or service. And this isn't about telling people that they shouldn't be thinking these things. It's about authentically standing up and saying to them, I get that this is probably what you're thinking, and here's why you don't need to worry about that. And by addressing the elephant in the room, by proactively saying, I get that you're worried it's expensive, or I understand that it seems like it's time consuming, but here's why you don't need to worry about that, and here's why it is a good choice for you as long as you're the right person for this thing. And that's going to generate loads of trust, because quite clearly you're not just trying to sell for the sake of selling. You're trying to make sure that the right people are signing up for the thing that you offer. And ultimately, that's all people want. They just want to know that they're not going to be ripped off, because we all hate that feeling of being ripped off and of buying something that wasn't right for us. So why you? What is it about you or your product that is different or better or more suitable for your ideal client compared to your competitors? So these are things of talking about anything that's different about you or your product, any background or experience that you've got if you're selling a service that makes what you're offering particularly relevant, makes you particularly qualified to do it. And again, going back to your market research calls, a really great way to find this stuff out, because quite often what makes you stand out or makes your product stand out is more obvious to your audience than it is to you. And so when you're doing things like doing surveys or offboarding calls, or speaking to old clients or customers, ask them, what was it about my product or service that made you decide to buy it? Or when you're looking at reviews, see what it is that made people choose that particular product, why they chose to buy it, and then did it fulfill that promise or did it not fulfill that promise? And you can start seeing the gaps that you can fill with your marketing, as long as you're confident that what you offer is going to fill that gap. And this is how you can start carving out your niche and your USP and make yourself stand out. Why now? So again, these are the triggers that made clients and customers purchase the thing at the time that they did. So in a way, it links a little bit to their pain points. There comes a point where there's like a trigger that's like, right, I need to do it now. And so what was that trigger? What made them decide that it's today? and not next week? Or why was it today and not last month? And so that will give you insight into where your ideal client is exactly when they're at the point of making that purchase decision. And so you can talk to them about that and meet them at that point. And the other thing you can put under this touch point of why now is if you've got any discounts or sales going on, if you've got limited spots for people to work with you, if you're going to be putting your prices up, that could be a good point for people who've been thinking about it for a while to decide to take the plunge. So just have that in mind and make sure you're touching on that one way or the other regularly. Features, right, so this is the bit that people seem to jump into right at the beginning, and I've put it here at the end, towards the end, for a reason. Because the features of the thing that you're selling, which is the nuts and bolts of your program, it's, how long is it going to take? What, do we meet in person? Do we meet on Zoom calls? What's the thing am I buying? What's the tangible thing I'm buying? All the other stuff coming before it are all emotional things. They're all emotional touch points that you really need to connect with your audience, because they're going through that journey emotionally of deciding, okay, it sounds right for me. And then just before they buy, they want to know, okay, I just want to know exactly what's it going to look like? How's it going to feel? What am I going to get? And so you definitely need to incorporate that into your social media content. But a lot of people focus on that to the exclusion of some of the other stuff, which really is a lot more important in terms of this brand or idea. And then the call to action posts. So these are the ones also really important that most people don't do. Or on the flip side, some people, that's all they do. And, this is the sort of salesy bit. So the call to action post is the one where you say, here's my thing, buy it. And, you can combine that with the features, because lots of other energy on posts dealing with all the emotions around it. Now here's a post to explain exactly what it is and how much it's going to cost, and buy it, sign up now. Give people that explicit call to action. So, some businesses don't do it enough. They kind of feel like, oh, I just need to give value. But then if you're not telling your audience if you're not telling them what to do, then they're not going to do it. Online, we're very quick. We move around very quickly. If you make me hunt for anything or make me work for it, I'm probably just not going to bother. On the flip side, if you're doing too many of these, then your audience is going to tune out, because all you're doing is talking about yourself all the time. It's like, here's my thing, buy my thing, here's my thing, buy my thing. Your marketing needs to be about them, about connecting with them and making them feel listened to. And so that's why it's like one call to action post for these 6 other ones that are, more about them. In terms of consistency, I've boiled it down to 7 steps for a reason. And that's because if you want to stay consistent, a really great way of doing that is to post once a day. And then what you could do is allocate one of these touch points to one day of the week. And that means that that every 7 days, every week, you're hitting each of these you're hitting each of these touch points, including calls to action, including showing your expertise, and including showing empathy for their struggles and their desires. Okay, so let's put this all together into the system I've called the social flow method. So step 1 is to connect with your audience. Do the market research calls. Look at customer reviews. Do your competitor review mining. Ask for client feedback. Get it all recorded, get it transcribed, and just create an archive, a library of all this language that is going to connect with your audience, because it's in essence reflecting back to them stuff that they've said to you. And then to do this authentically, you need to make sure that your values are aligning with their values. And then to be able to make sure that you're using their language, you need to collate all your messaging into a document that I've got called the messaging matrix. And I'm just going to go through that in a moment, because that's also linked to how you become consistent. So again, it's those marketing touch points that we talked about, those 7 touch points that you want to make sure you're connecting with your client one a day for one day a week at least. And the way to stay on top of that is through a Trello board that I've created, a template And the Trello board combined with the messaging matrix document allows you to apply this social flow method to your own marketing. So this is the messaging matrix document. And so what I suggest you do is use this document to collate all the information and feedback that you get from all the research that you do and the conversations that you have. The top bit, like your one reader, your ideal client, in a way, this is the bit that you would do at the end, because going through the process of filling everything else out will help you to really get clear on this one reader, one ideal client. And by one reader, I mean the person who is the perfect person to be reading your social media posts. You could use the same process to create a journey down a sales page as well. Make sure that you've got one reader, one person who is reading that sales page. And then down here you can start just pasting in their language, just copy and paste from your transcriptions, anything that are their struggles, put their benefits, their desires or outcomes in here. We've got a place for objections. So this is a complete match back to those marketing touch points I've explained. And so everything that you get from the conversations that you have with your audience, you can put in here, and it just becomes this huge resource that you can add to, dip into, and keep using for different products and services time and time again. You can also put in here anything that comes out of your own brainstorming sessions, any content ideas that come to you. If as a team you work through these things together, you can put all that in there. And you might want to do something like separate out what's something that the audience has said compared to something that you've brainstormed, because then it will become obvious to you if what you think the struggle is different to what they're saying it is. And this allows you to keep refining your positioning and refining your messaging. And then the Trello board is turning this into social media posts. So what you can do is just take each of the ideas that come out of the conversations and organize them into boards. Now this Trello board's free, and in here you can get a copy of this, and there are also some instruction videos on how to use the Trello board to manage your social media content, how to use it to plan stuff out through the calendar feature, and basically put this social flow framework together for yourself. I've packaged all this up into a mini toolkit that you can download for free. So if you go to bit.ly/the social flow method, it will take you to this landing page. And if you give your email, you'll get access straight away via email to a link that will take you to this Trello board. And so yes, you'll go on an email list, but if you just want to take the method and then unsubscribe, that's absolutely fine. But I do share lots of other information and ways of getting the most out of your copywriting for marketing on social media, as well as through things like landing pages and all that other good stuff. If you've gotten this far, thank you so much for sticking around. My name is Kathy Topping, and I am a sales conversion copywriter, or in other words, I write words that sell without sleaze. So I work with coaches, therapists, other businesses in the personal development space, and they hire me to write things like landing pages, email sequences, all that kind of stuff to get consistent sales for their proven offers. And so this social flow method has come out of the work I've done with those one-on-one clients. So I can take the methods that I use to write this copy that actually works and share it with businesses who might not be using the online funnel formula or aren't ready to hire a copywriter, so that they can apply the principles themselves to their own marketing. I've got a website, kathytopping.com. I will be straightforward. At the moment, there's not a lot on there, but you can look at one of the case studies for the work I did for one of my clients. And I've also got a Facebook group called Words That Sell, and that's where more training and tips and ways that I share my knowledge. That's the home where all of that sort of stuff takes place. So thanks again for your time. Don't forget to download the social flow method. It's free. And I appreciate your time today.